Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to LOUAI Hussein Masterpiece of Defense. We are here in OZU University, room 24. Some of the wonderful members of OZU and other people also here sitting in the audience. We're facing some stuff. Actually, it's on. Okay. Sorry for the complication of doing blended events, and we don't have any technical assistance, so we're trying to do our best. And the meeting is being recorded, it's being live streamed, and we can now begin by introducing our distinguished jury members. And why don't we do that? Yes, if one please start.
Okay. Am I sharing the screen or you are, Professor Kamis? Okay. So, can you see my screen? Hear your audio? Okay, so we have, welcome everyone. So today we have the subject from Roman to Umayyad, the formation process of the Great Mosque of Damascus and of the surrounding urban tissues. Please welcome with me my advisor and the jury member, Professor Alessandro Camis from OZU University. He graduated in architecture at the Pienza University. Before graduation, he cooperated with Sartugo Architetti Associates for the new Italian embassy in Washington, D.C. and the Church of Jesus, Holy Faith in Rome. In 2007, he discussed his doctorate thesis on history of medieval town planning in Ravenna, and therein attended postdoctoral studies until 2014. He taught at the Rome program of the School of Architecture, Faculty of Architecture and Design in University of Miami, and Fine Arts of Girna American University in Cyprus. He directed until 2018 the International Center for Heritage Studies and Department of Interior Architecture. He's a member of ICOMOS Italy, Secretary General of the Cyprus Network for Urban Morphology, and Research Director of the Association for Historical Dialogue and Research Cyprus. He's now Associate Professor and Director of the Laboratory of Dynamic Research on Urban Morphology, DRUM, at the Faculty of Architecture and Design of OZU University in Istanbul. His main research interests include architecture design, urban morphology, advanced technologies for conservation, and enhancements of architectural heritage. Our second jury member, we have Professor Dr. Albert Unlu from OZU University. He obtained his BS degree architecture from Istanbul Technical University, Faculty of Architecture in 1979. He has obtained his Master of Science degree from ITU MMLS program in architecture in 1980. He attended PhD program in environment behavior studies in University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee between 1984-1985 as Aga Khan Award for Architecture Scholar. He obtained then his PhD in architecture from ITU Science and Technology Institute in 1987. He taught architecture design and theory courses in ITU as assistant and associate professor between 1988-1990, and architecture design and post-occupancy evaluation between 1991 and 1993 at King Faisal University in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He continued to teach architecture design in undergraduate level, environment behavior theory, architecture and epistemology in postgraduate levels between 2002-2008 as professor of architecture in ITU. His research focuses on architectural design theories, environment behavior studies, and theories, space syntax theory, and epistemology. Our Third jury member, Professor Dr. Banu Manab from Kadir Has University. She received her bachelor degree in 1995 from Bilkent University in Faculty of Fine Arts, Design and Architecture, Department of Interior Architecture and Environment Design. She did her postgraduate studies at the same university in 1997, and a thesis titled as Effects of Different Lighting Arrangements on Space Perception. She graduated from Istanbul Technical University in 2005, received her PhD in the Department of Architecture Construction Technology program, completed her thesis titled as Effect of Luminous Glare Difference and Colors, Temperature and Visual Comfort Conditions, a Model Study. She acted as member of Treasurer in the 6th, 7th, and 8th Team Executive Board of Turkish National Committee of Illumination and was the Secretary General in 9th term. Her works have been exhibited in national architectural competitions as well as international product design competitions. Also, being the winner of TOPITAC Incentive Awards, Professor Dr. Manab has supervised and has been supervising postgraduate theses that have been completed and are ongoing. Associate Professor Julia Nalin Danilia, my second advisor. She's unfortunately mistakenly written as jury member, but she's my co-advisor. She received her PhD in architecture design for Mediterranean countries at the Polytechnic University of Paris. From September to December 2004, she was recipient of a postdoctoral scholarship at Aga Khan Academy for Islamic Architecture at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. From the academic year 2005, 2006 to 2010, 2011, she was adjunct professor at the Faculty of Architecture at Polytechnic University. From 2011 to 2020, she was a researcher and assistant professor at ISAR Department of Polytechnic University of Paris. She has been associate professor at Polytechnic University, and she is an author of over 100 publications published in continuity between 1996 and 2009, including 6 books, 3 edited books, 28 papers, and design and conference proceedings. Finally, we have Professor Rada Bilal from Damascus University. She's a Vice Dean of High Institute of Regional Planning and Head of Department of Regional Development and Natural Resources and Environment Protection. She's also a member of Department of Sanitary and Environmental Engineering at the Civil Engineering Faculty at Damascus University. She's also head of Environment Committee, Syndicate Engineering. And she is an external consultant for this research. And let me please introduce myself. My name is LOUAI. I grew up in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, until I completed my secondary education in 2014 from Natural Sciences section at Dar al-Thaqaf High School. In summer of 2014, I attended a master class in architecture visualization in Venice, Italy. And in the same year, I joined the Department of Architecture and Design at OZU University with graduation in 2018. I graduated, then I worked for 1 year as assistant architect and freelance designer, and then went back to academic path by enrolling in the Master of Science degree with thesis at the Hussein University. In the summer of 2021, I was given the opportunity, thanks to Professor Kamis, to act as a tutor at the Second International ISAR Architecture Summer School in Castelvecchio Calvisio, Abruzzo, Italy, and at the Roman Forum, Rome, Italy. Thank you very much. I'll start in a moment my presentation.
So thank you, LOUAI, for this introduction, and welcome to all our guests. I hope we are not going to face further technical issues. It's not simple to do blended events, but we are getting used to that.
I hope you can see my screen. Bro, how do you remove the timer to shift automatically?
Yeah, take away that.
Okay. Dear jury members, advisors, scholars, and guests, today I will present the final outcome of my research from Roman to Umayyad, the formation process of the Great Mosque of Damascus and of the surrounding urban tissues. Umayyad Mosque of Damascus and its surrounding urban tissues are considered as main landmark of the old city. They are sophisticated examples of built environments with rich historical values. Oh. Does it appear also? Sorry for the technical problems. So, Umayyad Mosque of Damascus and its surrounding urban tissues are considered as main landmark of the old city. They are sophisticated examples of built environments with rich historical values. In each of their corners, indications of each civilization could be read from the current structures, which I herewith intend to explain how. Professor Giuseppe Strappa, an important figure from the Italian School of Urban Morphology, wrote, which I would like to quote, "Cities can be conceived as a result of a transformation process, form in a continuous evolution, and buildings could be considered as organisms in which the actual shape derives from the transformation process, starting from the matter who becomes material, elements, structures, organism itself." The thesis aims to reconstruct the formation process of the Great Mosque of Damascus and its surrounding urban tissues by reinterpreting them as a result of a continuous transition from Roman to Umayyad phases. Previous studies did not specify neither the location of the church, which was located within the enclosure, and did not provide physical evidence on the relationship between the mosque and its surroundings. One part of the study hypothesizes that the temple's outer enclosure of the Territorial was enlarged during the empowerment of the military structures in the region under the reign of Emperor Diocletian in the late 3rd century. The other part of this study investigates the pre-Islamic structures and building forms and their transformation processes by analyzing the current urban context, including the building variants and remaining monuments to demonstrate the continuity of the building process of the Great Mosque. This presentation is based on 4 main sections: introduction to literature and the adapted methodologies, performing analysis on historical records and morphological examination, discussion on the building block of the Great Mosque as a continuous process, and conclusion which includes phase diagrams, general outcomes, and few remarks on my personal recommendations on design and research opportunities. Let us start by introducing to the literature review. In the 18th century, the earliest visit by British traveler Bocock marked the first schematic plan of the Great Mosque and its surroundings, with a few indications on the remaining elements surrounding the mosque. He believed that the mosque was entirely transformed from a former church. In 1855, Porter lived in the city for 5 years, surveyed the mosque, and recorded the preserved structures, including the atrium space at the southern part of the mosque. He believed that this space belonged to the church as an expansion done by Arcadius, son of Theodosius the Great. In 1905, Spears, who toured the east and west, reconstructed the preserved monument located west of the mosque called the Propylaeum. He suggested that this composition dated back to the middle of the 2nd century, which was ordered by Emperor Trajan under the direction of Apollodoro of Damascus. In 1921, 2 German scholars, Watzinger and Wolzinger, aimed to reconstruct the Roman city. They believed that the space of the mosque hosted the Roman temple known as Jupiter and had included a cella located at the center of the temenos and known as the temenos, which is itself surrounded by an outer enclosure known as Peripolis and connected with the Gamma. In the same year, Dosso, who studied the temple and the church, argued that the former church was located at the southern part of the inner enclosure, ignoring the temple. Therefore, the mosque was entirely transformed without any distractions by adding a dome and few changes on the inner configuration. Almost a decade later, a French scholar, Savouget, aimed to reconstruct Damascus during Hellenistic phase, Savoje gave the city notion of double city, where the eastern part had belonged to the Hellenistic phase and the western part belonged to the Aramean ancient kingdom. He added that the Haddad temple intermediated between the two settlements before its conversion to total Hellenistic city. In the year of 1969, Criswell contradicted the Shaw theory on the placement of the church. He believed that the church was located at the same spot of the temple's cella. In 1989, Sack aimed to reconstruct the formation of Damascus city. She believed that the city was based on several tells located in the city settlement. And she believed that the Byzantine buildings did not adhere to former city plans, but were in contradiction to it. As a result, as we see in the right map, the main straight streets tend to shift its path. Many Roman buildings were transformed or distracted, and many spaces were available in the old city, perhaps due to the city's expansion. In 1991, As-Sayyad studied the Arab Muslim city. Based on a number of Arabic sources, he concluded a plan of the early Umayyad city and the enclosure as divided urban tissue between the Christians and Muslim inhabitants. In 2008, Syrian scholar Uqayli surveyed the mosque and parts of the surroundings dedicated to the Temple Territorial by indicating number of reserved columns found nearby the Great Mosque. Uqayli aimed to reconstruct the formation process of the Great Mosque by suggesting that the church and any other buildings located within the inner enclosure were entirely demolished to build the Great Mosque. In 2012, Nilia had highlighted traces of former structures dedicated to the Temple's Peripolis by conducting extensive urban readings on medieval and Ottoman houses surrounding the mosque. She suggested that the urban structures revealed origin of Roman strata based on regularity of the house's orientation, relativity of their measures, and history of the building blocks. In 2021, lastly, George Henry interpreted the evolution process of the Great Mosque based on historical and physical materials. He believed that many incidents affected parts of the Great Mosque, which he suggested two of them should be carried and taken in account when studying the Great Mosque. The fire of 1069, in which the mosque and its surroundings could be studied by comparing textual sources written before and after this incident, and the fire of 1893 during the late Ottoman Empire, with which the mosque could be studied and analyzed from historical photographs taken before this date. Now, let me introduce you to the adapted methodology. The methodological framework is based on combined study of historical sources, including physical and textual sources, and a typomorphological analysis by investigating the different level of resolutions to track the evolution process of urban settlement and the building blocks of the Great Mosque. This methodology is known as process-based analysis and is defined by Luigi and Mattia Maffei in 2018 as a process seen in the relationship between the form of cities and the phenomena of settlements at different organizational scales, from territories to cities, and from the urban fabrics to the individual building blocks. Let me at first introduce you to the historical value and the historical development of the city. The total formation of the antique city underwent 8 phases. Each phase has special character and influenced the city and the old enclosure. Only 7 of these were mentioned by previous scholars. In the 1st century AD, early imperial Rome included Damascus as part of the Decapolis region, and the temple was constructed by reconfiguring its Greek foundations. In the 2nd century AD, best known as late imperial city, the city was promoted to a metropolis and the temple was renovated. In the 4th century, Damascus was capital of Byzantine province, and the enclosure was transformed to a church with a few embellishments made on the surroundings. In 7th century AD, Umayyad's arrival in the region, the city became known as Dar al-Hijra, and the enclosure was divided between Muslims and Christians. Finally, in the 8th century AD, Umayyad's rapid expansion affected the city, as the city became a capital of the Islamic world, and the enclosure was entirely transformed to a mosque. But what we can notice in this diagram is the presence of inter-transition phase, namely in the 3rd century, that is known by the Tetrarchic period, in which the Syrian region witnessed a strong military struggles. During this time, Damascus became a colonia under Emperor Severus Alexander, as stated by Miller. Therefore, this research hypothesizes that during this particular phase, the enclosure and the surroundings were partially transformed and fortified to serve as a headquarters for the Roman army. One of the main indications on the importance of this phase is found in a text written by Byzantine chronicler Malalas, who mentioned that in the year of 289, Emperor Diocletian built arms factory at Damascus to support the Roman army with weapons and to defend the Eastern Empire. According to archaeological discoveries made by Putbard in 1937, as cited in Burns, Damascus was located on an important military route known as Strata Diocletiana. Scholars suggested that it was constructed in the 3rd century AD, but the sudden change of this road is noticeable to be shifting its path toward Damascus. This may reveal that the military importance were given to the city of Damascus at late phase of its original construction. Moreover, the geographical importance of the city was not only limited on military roads, but it can also be seen from the Roman trade routes depicted in 2nd century map known as Tabula Peutingeriana. In this map, the city is seen connected with major routes, and the 2 buildings represented the settlement facing the river of Rada. It seems that the major route and the river are the main features of forming the early urban settlement in Damascus. Moreover, as David Graff mentioned, that primary considerations must always be given to the total situation existed along the borders of the empire. We see here a map made by Butler in 1925 that showed Damascus as close to eastern borders of the Roman Eastern Empire. This provided further evidence on the nature and importance of the nature of Damascus as being close to the limits of the empire. Now, even if we see a medieval map entitled as the Tabula Asia Fort, made in 1540, medieval in age, by Sebastian et al., shows Damascus to be close to the main borders and depicts its location as oriented towards the river. As we see here, the 2 buildings were also facing the river, and as a symbol of its importance, the map also shows that the city was open to the gaze of the eastern border, overlooking towards the Syrian steppe. Now I will look into the morphological analysis that we have made. The analysis made on different levels to understand the total situation of the early formation of the settlement of Damascus. The theoretical model, as we see here, is known as the theoretical model of the territorial organism. It is the first step which aims to find the early foundation of the city's main urban centers and the logical formation process. As we see here, Damascus' importance originated from the fact that it is located on the river line, which itself originates from the springs coming down from the entire Lebanon and the Hermon Mountain. These ranges behaved as the main natural defense to the city, and early settlers tend to move on top of these ranges, forming top ridge routes. The top ridge routes were extended to include secondary ridge routes and established high promontory settlements for protection purposes. The promontory settlements then was connected with each other, and in between, new low promontory settlements were formed, connected by a cross ridge route. Early settlements continued to move from upper settlements to form medium and low valley settlements. During this time, Damascus was formed by the use of routes originated from the medium and low promontory settlements and by the valley routes parallel to the river of Rada. And then, for the exchange of goods and easy transportation between other valley settlements located at the northwest-south axis, cross-valley routes were established, with one crossing the old city of Damascus in a diagonal way. We observe here that the similarity of the theoretical routes synthesized from the territorial cycle with the ancient routes is fascinating. It indicated that these routes attributed in forming the early urban organization of the city of Damascus. As we observe here, on the city plan scale, the area surrounding the Great Mosque, we can see in this, as we can see here, that the area surrounding the Great Mosque is located at the intersection of the Cross Valley route and the low promontory settlements, and are related to the ancient routes depicted in historical sources. This indicated that this particular area surrounding the Great Mosque was first urban settlements and had probably needed strong fortification for defense purposes. We can also observe that the river of Rada, we can also observe that the orientation of the urban structure is parallel to the valley routes and the ridge route seen on the straight street, which connected the old tells as illustrated by Sack in 1989. But we can also notice that this area is perpendicular to the Cross Valley route, which is parallel to the Strata Diocletiana route, and the ancient routes cross the city diagonally. So parallel to the river and orthogonal, perpendicular to the major routes. The importance of the river of Rada was seen connected to the early formation of the city. As stated by 1st century BC Greek geographer Strabo, among the rivers is the Chrysoraus, which begins at the city and the country of Damascene and is almost wholly used up in the conduits, for it irrigates a large territory that has a very deep soil. Additionally, it was also seen on a cartographical source by George and Franz depicting the Great Mosque and a palace to be closely related to the Barada River and the river itself, dividing the city into two settlements. The highlighted area and its relation to the study have been investigated in depth. How? First, we can notice that it is an enclosed space connected with the city from different directions. The main street network connecting the enclosures are originated from the main direction of the territorial routes that we have explained. Souk al-Buzuria Street, as well as Midhat Pasha, that is perpendicular to Midhat Pasha Road, forming the north-south axis. While on the other hand, from the Souk al-Hamidiyya Street and its continuation towards the Nofar Street, forming the other street connection with the city. So as we can see, also that the highlighted area is being located at the straight street, mentioned that this is a really important position as connected and intermediating the straight street. The studied area measures between 10 to 12 acres, or 30 heredia in Roman measures. Urban blocks constituting parts of the southern area measures between 135 by 135 Roman feet. These measures are relatively similar to the face of a Roman block known as actus, as mentioned by Straba in 2018. And these measures are also seen to be different from the Hellenistic blocks observed in Savogé's plan, which each measures between 150 by 337 Roman feet. We can notice that the routes also, the main routes crossing the central axis of the building block of the Great Mosque, tend to shift towards both sides, east and west. This seen as a phase that was discussed by Caniggia in 1989 in a case of Florence, when the enclosure was no longer used for military purposes. The path seems to shift and more importance would be given to the urban settlements surrounding the Territorial. The total configuration of the highlighted area is strongly similar to the typological plan of Roman headquarters located in Lampiasis and Diocletian camp. First, their measures are relatively similar. They measure between 30 heredia to 50 heredia. Second, they're similar to direct axis that we have mentioned before, as we see here in this slide and as explained earlier. And third, we see the relative similarity between the position of the Praetorium in two of the settlements and the case of Damascus, and also their measures to be relatively similar, as well as the relative similarity of the urban tissue of the mosque with the urban tissues located at the southern part of the highlighted area. So the southern urban tissue requires further attention. As Arab traveler Ibn Jubair in 12th century stated that when you exit from the Bab al-Ziyada, it opens to a large vestibule, and leads to a cavalry barrack, and towards its left there is a palace of Muawiyah. Following Ibn Jubayr's description on the situation at the southern urban tissue, I have reconstructed the southern part. I conclude that it is an area, this area seemed to be an important center for Umayyad administration, formed during Roman period by building circuited walls and included other imperial buildings functioned as military or imperial structures. To sum up, here you can see the highlighted area formed of diagonal routes originated from the straight street as a matrix route. Part of it included Peripolis and shows in red, and the highlighted area showed in blue is the extension part. We can observe that the mosque urban tissue and its southern area is relatively close in terms of their measures and proportions. We can observe that from the typological plan that it includes large buildings and at the southern part, and this presence of large aggregates of Ottoman khans and palaces located within the southern urban part is greatly affecting the typology of the southern area, and the archaeological soundings done in 1989 revealed many fragments dating to the different phases. Another urban studies I made at the southeastern urban tissue revealed the presence of Syrian courtyard aggregates. The configuration of their interiors and the organization of their courtyard spaces is found relatively similar to Unlu's studies made in 1998, which suggests that they derive from the evolution process of Roman atrium houses. Unlu believed that they can be interpreted as an advanced typology of both Iraqi Tarma house and Anatolian Sofa houses. The analysis on the buildings of the Great Mosque is the fourth and last phase of the adaptive methodology. In this section, I will aim to show the mosque as a continuation of former buildings. The Great Mosque includes the following spaces: the prayer hall, which includes transepts with dome, the sided halls which include 2 towers at each side, the courtyard, which includes 3 domes and a portico, 4 sided doors still operated at each side, and a northern minaret and tower at the northern side. The Temple of Damascus, if existed, would have been consisted of parts specific to the Greco-Roman world and widespread in the Eastern Roman region. Many of the investigated examples of temples, we find that the inner enclosure and Peripolis to be located to be the main features of these temples. As we can observe, the sophistication of the propylaeum at one side in the Greco-Roman world, the temples in the Greco-Roman world. In 2010 also, Syrian scholar Kiwan produced a volume containing coins found in Damascus. We can observe that there are 3 main features depicting the temples. One is that the arched structures, second domed structure, and third through arched structure with peristyle. But the coin that was not discussed is a coin dedicated to Emperor Macrinus in 218, depicting a gambreled roof and a river floating. This could be an indication of the temple, the structure in Damascus. As we can see here, I highlight the area which indicates the places of the temple. Secondly, as proposed earlier, building variants of Umayyad castles transferred from Roman Territorium and located on the Strata Diocletiana are a great examples as they share strong physical similarities with the enclosure of the Great Mosque. As we see here, that most of these plans include sided halls and 4 towers, and they include basalt structures, and included at the same strata route that Damascus had been located at. And we can see here a southern front of the Great Mosque. We see the towers, the structure of the towers. We can also see the different of stone ashlars used in the towers and in the southern wall. We can see also here another fragment which indicates the same enclosure and with the investigated buildings which is the arrow slits found on the western side of the Great Mosque that is similar with Roman castles found in Mar Musa, some 90 kilometers near northeast of Damascus. Therefore, we can also see, based on the study, that the southern front of the Great Mosque share an important, we can observe that the southern front of the prayer hall at the Great Mosque is very similar to the mosaic of Theodoric's palace in Ravenna, as stated by Camus in 2008, that it was built in the 4th, 5th century. Similar arrangement is also seen in a manuscript written by Greek Byzantine chronicler John Skylitz, depicting the coronation of Mikhail III in the 9th century. These similarities were seen as indicators of imperial importance given to the enclosure, where the ruling figure centered the transept structure, and as indication of the metaphorical meaning for housing the figure of Caliph in the central mihrab. Therefore, I herewith highlight the elements dedicated to the Territorial structure, including eastern and western halls, 4 towers at each corner, and the tower at the northern door, and parts of the northern facade of the prayer hall. Similar steps were followed to analyze the Byzantine church. In the current enclosure, we analyzed the typology of early Byzantine churches surveyed by Butler, and were found to have different sizes and interior arrangements. Nevertheless, we find that the second and third type to be most related to the to parts of the prayer hall, as some measure between 45 by 30 to 40 meters. We can also see a great indication by a textual source on the transformation of the temple to a church. So we can see here that both chroniclers, Malalas and Pascal, they mentioned that Theodosius also destroyed them, but also when it comes to the temple in Damascus, they use the word made. The word made here may strongly suggest that they both meant the area inside the inner temenos enclosure, as until this day, the whole enclosure is considered as holy. Moreover, it is observed that the structural details of the western arcades preserved outside the enclosure are very similar to the arcades of the western gates, which both include spolvin on top of Corinthian capitals, supporting arches of stone ashlars. These details also are seen on a photo taken in 1893 before the fire by Bonfields inside the prayer hall of the Great Mosque. So these similarities were found to be a strong indicator on the location of the church inside the current enclosure. We can see here, according to the analysis were made, the church was possibly located and most probably had been located at the western side of the prayer hall. Finally, the building of the mosque followed 2 stages, as suggested by Guedetti, that the early holy spaces in Islam were constructed in 2 consequences. First, a small mosque known as masjid were built, and then expansion of these small mosques and the formation of large mosques known as jami'. In the case of Damascus, it seems that it followed similar patterns, as indicated by 7th century Frankish bishop, that there has been built in the same city where he means Damascus, because we know that he traveled to Damascus in 670, a church. He mentioned about the church of unbelieving Saracens, which they frequent, which also Arab scholars agree that the mosque and the church had been located on the same spot of the inner enclosure, as the western half was the church for Christians and the eastern half was for Muslims. As we can see here, that the highlighted area is the location of early mosques that had been built inside the inner enclosure. It also was found relatively similar to the early reconstruction of early Umayyad mosque in Jerusalem made by Grafman and Ireland in 1999. We can find that they both have relative similar measures, as the eastern part measure between 90 Umayyad cubit to 40 Umayyad cubit. The eastern part at the reconstruction plan of the early Jerusalem mosque measured between 70 Umayyad cubits to 90 Umayyad cubits. And the last phase of this formation process is the Great Mosque was built by acquiring the western space of the church and included it in the mosque, in the early mosque, means the masjid. As stated by Ibn Jubayr, Al-Walid, who took that half of the church, which remained in the hands of the Christians, and embraced it. In the Arabic term is adkhalaha, in the mosque. And Ibn Asakir, who credited the building of the dome to Al-Walid's age. And therefore, the formation of the prayer hall was resulted from combining these two structures to build the prayer hall of the Great Mosque. And therefore, the building process of the Great Mosque was resulted from the emergence of the needs as seen as the continuation of the building process, seen from the dedicating each element displayed in the current enclosure to a phase where the former buildings were constructed inside the inner enclosure. In conclusion, I will say three main things to this study. First outcome is that the area formed in 8 phases. It was established by considering the spring line of river of Rada and the territorial and historical routes during ancient phase. When the city was under the Hellenistic control, the temple was expanded to include the Peripolis and connected with the agora, connected to the agora area inside the city. When the city was under Roman control, the temple was expanded to include other areas such as the Gamma and connected from both sides. During Tetrarchic phase, which we mentioned earlier, the enclosure, the city was given the military importance, which resulted in expanded the outer enclosure of the Peripolis, fortifying it. The inner enclosure was used as Territorium, with the surrounding area functioned as a headquarters and residency for the army, as we can see here, and a direct connection towards the Territorial. In the early Byzantine governed the city, when the Byzantine governed the city, the church was constructed at the western part, and we can see the shift of the street from the central part towards the west to include the to end up with the church enclosure. During the late Byzantine phase, the church was then expanded, and the palace of Byzantine governor had been located south of the enclosure. In the early Umayyad phase, the southern part was divided, as the inner enclosure was also divided. The eastern part had been under the Umayyads, and finally, when the second phase of Umayyads arrived, the total enclosure was transformed to a mosque by connecting all these two blocks of the prayer hall and governing the whole of the city. As a conclusion, we can say that there is an inter-transition phase on which the inner enclosure and parts of the outer Peripolis were used for military purposes. The analysis on the typology of Umayyad mosque, form and order, represent a continuation process without major distractions. 3. Sequential transformation of the mosque as a special typology is resulted from the critical evolution, as Canisia has mentioned, of multiple types as seen from the typological analysis. Finally, I would say that the general outcome of this research, we attested the possibility of including military enclosure. We demonstrated the theory of continuation process. We explained how parts of the Great Mosque have similar features with Roman Territorial structures, and we proved how the Great Mosque should not solely be studied, but in relation to its surrounding urban tissues. Finally, we made a typological plan of the area surrounding the Great Mosque for potential future studies. And here, I would like to add a few remarks of my recommendation for future studies: to conduct further archaeological excavations at the highlighted area, to implement strategies to renovate the area surrounding the mosque, and to investigate the historical canals of Rada River, as they are the main features and the important landmark of the old city, to research the city of Damascus in comparison with other cities located on the valley and cross-valley routes, to find more on the evolution process of historical town in the region. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much. I think illustrating this analytical. And first we need the formation process of the Great Mosque of Damascus and its surrounding as a unitary organism. In fact, the mosque has that form for the location and surroundings and the continuity of the evolution. And in this sense, research is bringing new light onto the understanding of the historical phase of the transition between the late Roman and the Maya, which seems to be not only this phase, but that continues. The Umayyad past resembles greatly the Roman territorial. But not only as a typology, most of those palaces were built on top of the Roman courts. We can recognize throughout northern Africa the continuity between the late Roman military structures and early Roman military or residential functions. And the mosque in a way confirms this process with strong continuity in the evolution. So we have to imagine, this is my hypothesis, that even though the country was changing the past, but the people were the same. So probably the person who built the mosque was the grandnephew of the person who built the temple. So the continuity is not only in the building, but also in the people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Tendency to do the speech to Banu.
Okay.
That's the tendency.
Banu, Roger.
Your sound is not very clear.
Well, actually, I do not have any questions, but I'd like to congratulate both the advisor and the co-advisor and also Ladi Hussein for this wonderful presentation. Actually, the structure of the thesis is well defined for my part, and all the subsections are analyzed and defined very clearly. The methodology is clear. The timeline is explained with diagrams and with a well academic language as part from it. And also starting with Strappa's words and referring it throughout the thesis, and the presentation is nice and well defined for me. And for at the end of the presentation, as remarks for further research, I think they are also very important to have a digital survey, to make digital graphs and analyses, and to produce a digital archive for this. I think this is very essential for every part related to cities and trying to combine that history with also the census as well. So for my part, everything is clear, and I'd like to thank you all for inviting me as well to this jury.
Thank you very much.
That's the microphone.
This microphone.
Okay. Somehow that's I have different feelings about this presentation. First of all, I would like to thank to Hussein. He's my student from graduate classes, and even though I will also thank to supervisor Alessandro Camis and the co-advisor and the external consultants. Of course, it's very important, almost highlighted now, and then the foundations, the background is very interesting, and then also that I noticed that it's very interesting process starting from the BC. I mean, it's I think 900 BC up to in this 7th century Umayyad, the second stage, also in the first stage, also becoming a kind of a mosque. I can understand everything, even though it's highlighted with the process, you know, the educational things and the military barracks and the, you know, all kind of things was happened, and the functionalities was changed during the historical process chronologically. It's a good presentation. So when we come to the end of the thesis, that I was searching for new strategies, action for conservation, but I couldn't find out. So this was the missing part, especially at the end of the thesis. The first thing, so that's the at the end of the thesis is you are mentioning about some recommendations, but they are not recommendations. So you are mentioning about the river, you are mentioning about the roads, and you are mentioning about giving a recommendation about archaeological excavations. So I am not expecting from you. I think this I was expecting is a kind of a how we can protect this mosque and conserve this mosque within a kind of it is a historical background, and even though with the vicinity of the mosque, surrounding of the mosque. So let's say why this mosque is a landmark, and I mean this is a very critical point. I mean you may be searching a kind of a one point, and then deeply and till it you are going inside to the landmark, but you are forgetting the outside. I mean how it has a connection with the roads, and how its connection with the spaces, the other spaces, urban tissue, and then those kind of things. So this was a kind of a little bit, you know, I was expecting how it could be linked to the urban tissue, and how. So let's say, if you, my question is, if I come to a kind of a regular session, my question is, LOUAI Hussein. If you want to, if you are an architect, and then Umayyad Mosque is with you, I mean, in your hands. If you want to protect it, if you want to conserve it, with the surroundings, what kind of strategy that you can implement? And so that's my question. Don't forget it. So that's the. I think that's my recommendation. Of course, the conclusion part, the recommendation part should be revised. So that's somehow that's of all things that's you are going and stopping and in front of the wall. Okay, please answer my question.
Okay. Now?
Yeah. Now.
Okay.
This is Jure.
Well, first of all, thank you for your comment, and I think that one part of the solving the issue is knowing where is the issue, and this is why the first step in identifying the problem is that we have to excavate, and we have to understand the total situation. But unfortunately, for the current moment, we don't have. Yes, I would for sure. I would look at the typological plans of the surrounding urban tissues. So meanwhile, we have to study the blocks in each urban tissue surrounding the mosque to see the relationship between the residential and to see the relationship between the landmarks. And maybe we can also open new ways for inhabiting this area. Because as far as I know, that this area has been kept for a long time as nobody has taken certain procedures to preserve it. And this is one of the problems, that they do not have a specific point of what this area used to be or used to function in the history. So maybe this part of the study, can give the people and the inhabitants of the city a general view. That's why I would actually mention the landmark. The landmark is not only the Great Mosque, as some other scholars might disagree, but the mosque is not only the building itself, but the surrounding urban tissue should be carried, it should be studied in detail, it should be investigated by doing digital survey plans. We have to understand how the relationship between residential, the commercial, and other religious parts can be connected together in this urban tissue. And maybe, who knows, maybe in the future that this area could be preserved well, because this is what from my point of view, this is the early foundation of the urban settlement. So maybe we can teach the people about this particular urban tissue in the old city itself. So I don't know if that is the answer of your question, but.
Okay. Thank you. I got some good responses.
Yes, maybe that could be part of a continuation of the research about the survey and restoration, conservation of the Great Mosque and its surroundings. So we hope it will be possible in the future to go there, because the problem is that in this time, well, we got the pandemics, we got the political situation, everything is complicated, but we do hope that in the future we will be able to continue this. And that is a very good point. Actually, well, the mosque is in a good situation, but it is indeed in danger, as most of the heritage in that country. So I hope that in the future we can extend and develop our cooperation with the University of Damascus on the issue of the protection, conservation, restoration, if needed, of the mosque and the many other buildings included in the area, which we barely saw in the plan, but most of those palaces are quite old, quite ancient, and very important. So now, if anyone else, I mean, the advisor and the consultant, Gada, Bilal, and Anna Linda Nelia would like to give some feedback.
I don't know if Anna Linda want to speak. Anna Linda? Okay.
Please go.
Okay, we'll start. Thank you, Anna Linda. I don't have any question, of course, because I'm an external consultant, but I would like to really appreciate the great job of LOUAI. He was a hard worker and a very good student. He did a very good job. He provide a really very specific thesis for his master, and a great job to even for rehabilitate and provide our mosque, Umayyad's mosque. I really appreciate and thanks for the very specific advisors, Professor Alessandro and Professor Anna Linda, and wishing all the best for LOUAI to go forward for PhD. So, thank you to all the audience also, and even for the jury member of also. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, me too. I don't have specific questions, but I just want to again to stress the importance of this research, because from my side, I think it was particularly important the methodology that was used, because in a way LOUAI, through his research, recalled us that landscape and urban landscape is not just perception, it's also stratification of architecture in time, and we can read it as a text we can read the urban morphology, and from there we can understand a lot about the history and structure of the city. And this is particularly important from Damascus because especially this Roman phase, which was I don't know, unveiled, uncovered through this research, is maybe one of the less known phase, no? So I think it's very important really to understand that it's an area surrounding the mosque that can be analyzed as something which is really connected, no? It's not just made by spots, but there is an area which has a specific form, specific history, and I'm looking forward to see, you know, the recovery of the area around the mosque of Damascus, which now really needs a lot of efforts and a lot of work to be restored and rehabilitated. So thank you very much for the opportunity that I had to learn more about Damascus through this research.
Thank you. We raised hand from Nir Buras, and within the audience we have Nir Buras, Institute for Classical Planning. It's New York City, but we have people from Kuwait, from Norway, from Italy. So if anyone else would like, Nir, go ahead.
Well, first of all, congratulations to LOUAI and to Professor Khamis for this really excellent work. It is both interesting and necessary knowledge, I think, when it comes to understanding this kind of layering, historic and experiential and political and cultural layering that altogether makes cities. And I think that your methodology has really told the story in an extraordinary way. I'm also want to congratulate Professor Khamis on leading the effort. There's no doubt in my mind that good leadership is extraordinarily important in good results. And also the other members of your team who contributed as much as they did. Works like this, I think, are of the outstanding sort that really make landmarks in study. And so congratulations with regard to that. I agree with the professor's comments on the urban the grid, the streets, the buildings, the surrounding, the context. That is a real important thing as well. I think that the way I understand your understanding is that these are two separate topics, really. But the professor was right in saying that it's the whole part of the city that needs to be looked at. So that's an area for future study. And I think that the one of the big questions that is raised is, well, now that we are here and we know all this history, what do we do with it? Do we just retain structures and manage them as empty skeletons or full skeletons, you know, like hermit crabs in shells of other animals, reused one way or another? Or do we actually upgrade some of the buildings in the historic neighborhood in the styles of the historic times and work them in a manner, in a beautiful holistic manner that includes the hand skills, the manual skills of builders and of the building arts, in revitalizing a fabric which is hundreds and hundreds of years old. So thank you for this great work, and thank you for the inspiring questions that it raises.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I think the jury has to meet. So we're gonna have to ask everyone to leave, except the jury. And you can come back in 15 minutes, okay? Okay, but I think we are missing. Yeah, she went out. So I'm gonna call her.
Shall we leave now, Alessandro? And we'll
Yes, please. You can come back in 15 minutes, okay?
Oh, okay, thank you, bye.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Merhaba Banu Hanım. I cannot hear you.
Okay, because I want to take this.
I think something.
Hold on.
Is it okay now?
Hold on.
Is it all right now?
Try again.
Can you hear me now? Is it all right?
Yes.
Okay. Something happened to the internet connection that therefore now I'm with you again. So sorry for the last 2 or 3 minutes if I missed anything.
I think that there was a spectator's comment, I think, right? One person, I think.
Yes, I mean, we had this research is sparking interest.
Who spoke at the end?
That's new Buddhist classical time.
Yeah. Yani, I think it is the, pardon, I think Al-Hussein's work is interesting, but he has some roots going back to text and some descriptions and some drawings also. But the urban tissue, the surrounding the area, seemed to be a little bit neglected in generally. But at the end of the thesis, at the conclusion section, maybe I think is he should give a kind of some conservation strategies in relation to urban tissue, regarding urban tissue, and even though that is the historical background of the.
Hocam?
Yeah, but that's not the topic of the thesis. So it's not part of the. It's not included in what he's doing. Might be for future.
Okay, but how mosque can be a landmark?
The topic of his thesis.
Because of the surrounding, right?
The topic of his thesis is the formation process of the mosque and the surrounding urban tissue, which he rebuilt entirely. The conservation of the mosque is another topic. Might be
conservation is another topic. I know.
Yeah, so it could be for the future. So we can.
But he says something about the river, something about the roads. So that's they're also surroundings. So I'm talking about that.
So he reconstructed the whole formation process from earlier times to later times of the entire enclosure of what is called the
I
peribos.
know, but
So the conservation is basically another thesis. So maybe, you know, in the future, if there is another research, we can work on that. It's something else. It's just another topic.
okay, I mean, it's, if it is a thesis like this, I can find out this knowledge from Wikipedia.
No, I don't think you can.
So what's that like?
I'm sorry. He has,
Wikipedia, if you open that Wikipedia, you can find out
no,
it's going to see this from Roman Church.
I don't understand what is your point. What is the problem here?
I mean, the point is what he's bringing.
So I think that was clearly shown. The reconstruction of the formation of the entire structure from the beginning to the end, that is not on Wikipedia. Trust me. None of this is on Wikipedia. Certain fragments are, but the entire enclosure being transformed into a Roman Praetorium and then transformed into the mosque, that is not on Wikipedia. None of this is on Wikipedia. Basically, this is the collection of all the available sources, all available information from historical data, and wrote, this is new, it's not. Trust me, it's not.
Okay, at the end of the thesis, what did he say? Let's come to 4 points, research direction. I mean, what did he say?
That was clearly repeated several times. What did he say?
I'm talking about the 4. So I'm saying instead, maybe he can look at it and he can revise these things. Did you have read it, right?
Yes, yes.
So it seems to me.
No, this is a design recommendation. That's not the
No,
outcome.
I'm talking about design recommendation, of course.
So that's basically an appendix to his work.
It's not an appendix, it's inside.
Yeah, so that is not the outcome of his research. The outcome of his research is the understanding of the formation of the mosque. Design recommendations are suggestions for the future.
Of course, I'm expecting this.
So you want him to include, I don't get your point. What do you want him to do?
My point is I'm a designer.
Yeah,
So it's when he's an architect, if he's doing these things, maybe he should give a kind of hints about the future.
yeah, but that would be another research. It's not the same. It's another topic. So I don't know, should we start over?
You should highlight this.
Actually, Alper Hocam, I understood that first he started with the words of Straba, and then he took the mosque with its surrounding as a case study, and then he referred back to analyze the chronological timeline at different scales and touching to the building scale with the surrounding and trying to understand what has happened depending on the timeline, the beliefs, the Christianity, Byzantine time, blah, blah, blah. So within that scope, I understood that he recommended this as a case study, and he said that this can be replicated for different cases as well. And now I'm also checking 6.3 research recommendations and design opportunities.
Yes.
Actually, he wrote similar things over there. Maybe he can add a few paragraphs to cover your suggestions as well. Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be so big, maybe that he can add up, he can a little bit strengthen this type of items.
Yes, but the point is that his research is not about design, not about restoration. So if you wanted to include one sentence about the restoration.
That's why I asked the question. You are an architect, you are in your hand. What should you do?
So that if your point is that you want him to add one sentence, including conservation strategies, that's fine. But otherwise it's another thesis.
Of course.
You know, so we're talking about adding one sentence in the suggestions, including conservation strategies, right?
Right.
Yeah, no problem.
And even though thinking around the mosque, so that it seems to be a little bit forgotten around the mosque and its surroundings.
No, hold on. So you're saying you want to include one sentence about including conservation strategies in the suggestion for the future. So that's one thing. Now, what is the other thing? What are you asking? What is your other suggestion?
I think that's the surrounding area. Maybe he said also buildings. You know, he said that there are some buildings, and these buildings should be searched. And,
For another research. Now, this one is done, right?
Absolutely. I'm talking about another.
So for the suggestion, he could include further research should be done on the, let's write this, okay? Let's write this. So in the last point, which is, you know, with design
Maybe,
recommendation,
Alice,
whatever. Yes,
maybe at that he can add a few sentences like this. For the limitations of the study, there was pandemic, so that actually he pointed out, I think both in the thesis and his presentation, that he couldn't go to these sites and maybe he couldn't take photos or additional analysis. So as a limited study,
so for the future
just-
studies, you can include, you know, conservation strategies and research on, further research on building types. Yeah. On building types and tissues around the mosque. Okay? Surrounding the mosque, let's say, surrounding the mosque. And conservation and restoration strategies and design strategies, let's say.
Restoration. Yeah. Design.
Conservation, restoration, and design strategies. So these are the recommendations for the future, basically. Yeah, no, of course. I mean, that's obvious. But I mean, if we're talking about doing another research about conservation, that's one more year.
Of course, I understand that.
So we can suggest that he includes in the, what is it called, the suggestion for the future, you know, future recommendation. The last, you know, little a sentence about conservation, restoration, and design strategies for the mosque, and one about researchers on buildings, types, and tissues surrounding the mosque, and we could say, and their conservation and design.
You can talk to him and you can decide.
No, I mean, as a jury, we can agree on a very simple thing, which is in the last, you know, paragraph, which is about future studies recommendation, please add one sentence about the conservation, restoration, design of the mosque, one sentence about restoration, conservation, design of the surrounding urban tissues.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I would recommend this for research recommendation design, which is 4 items.
Two more.
It might be too many, too much. I mean, maybe with your suggestion, it could be revised. My recommendation should be like this, because the other things are very clear, but when you come down to here, somehow you see kind of it's so vague now. Okay.
So we can have that revised, you know, what is it called? What is the title over there?
Yeah.
So what is the procedure for this? We need to have a new manuscript?
You have 1 month.
Uh-huh.
1 month.
Yeah, I think 1 month enough.
1 month.
So after that, what do we need to do?
Then the book is going to be binding, and then coming down to us, and then we are also signing them.
So basically, we are signing the final version, which is including these changes.
Exactly.
Okay, and there's 1 month for that.
So you have 1 month, and you can do these things. And it's very easy.
Yeah, no problem. And so what else should we do now? Is that okay, Banu?
Okay, all right for my part. Thank you. Okay, for Alper Hocam, it is okay for me.
You mean this?
Mine is after distribution. It's okay for me. It's okay for me. No problem, Banu Hocam.
What is that? Cannot.
You say you write approved, but she didn't.
What do we have to write there?
I said approved.
Approved. Okay. Banu, we did not write Kanati.
Okay,
So what, he has to go back?
I will be tomorrow, also Thursday, but again, we can check the time. If any other time me.
Okay, can they come back? Can we tell people to come back?
You can notify them.
Okay, let's call anyone else.
Ben gidiyorum.
Görüşmek üzere. Hoşça kalın.
Sağ olun, kusura bakmayın. Bu jüride ben orada fiziki olamadım ama bu şekilde de çözüm bulabildik. Yoksa yüz yüze görüşmek üzere dileyim hocam. İyi yıllar. Hoşça kalın hocam.
I will tell. They're coming.
Alessandro, shall I try from the computer again? It's my phone. The network connection is low, I think. Alessandro, will he visit again me?
Hello. Inshallah. Okay. Is everyone here?
Hello. Yeah, I'm from the telephone. I'm connecting from my phone. Do I need to connect from the computer again?
No, it's not needed. So basically the jury, after thorough discussion, has decided to approve the thesis with just a few recommendations. In the final paragraph, which is recommendations for future studies, whatever that, revise it by writing it, in a more elaborate form, but it's mostly including two very important points. Future studies should include restoration, conservation strategies for the mosque, and restoration, conservation, and design strategies for surrounding urban conditions. Yeah, I noticed here. Okay, so in the recommendations for the future, which should be revised. Okay, but besides revising and writing it in a better form, two main points should be included: the survey documentation, conservation, restoration strategies for the mosque, and survey documentation, restoration. conservation and design strategies for the surrounding hermitages, because the two topics, the mosque and the surrounding hermitages, seems to be missing in that last point, okay? But besides this, everything is okay.
So I have 1 month.
You got 1 month to do this, and then the manuscript would come for us for final approval. And I think you did not have the approved here, signed by Banu. So I think, I don't know, how does it work? Banu has to come back?
He can come to me tomorrow also, I'll be here.
I mean, that this is, go there and have that. We could write it, but that would not be appropriate. I think she has to write that. And then, oh, there's one more signature here. All right, there's 2 more. So then you got 1 month to revise, you know, but, well, besides adding these few points, I do think that your final presentation today has gone further than your manuscript. So there's probably a little bit of updating you have to do in the manuscript depending on the final outcomes, and that you got 1 month, so plenty of time to do that.
Okay.
And, you know,
Alessandro, for tomorrow, I have another jury for PhD thesis in the morning. So I think the right time to come can be at 1 p.m. if it's all right for him.
Yes, it's okay for me.
1, okay?
okay,
Because at 2 p.m. I have another Senato meeting. Okay.
Okay.
okay.
So do I have to come to you again for this?
No.
Okay,
she
so again,
has
thank
to, I
you.
sign everything. She has to write here,
Sign
approve.
and I get it back to you.
She has to write here, approve, see? She signed it,
Okay.
she signed it, but she did not
She
write
didn't write
approve,
it.
so she has to do that. And then, I don't know, these forms to whom they go, we'll figure that out. And it's for you, very small.
Thank you very
gift,
much.
okay?
Thank you.
So,
Okay,
thank you very
thank you.
much, everyone.
Welcome. Take care of you and have a nice day.
What about the degree? There is a, I didn't hear the degree of his thesis.
So the decree is that he has to revise the design recommendations, which is the last page. 2 points need to be added. Survey, restoration, conservation of the mosque, survey, conservation, and design of the surrounding urban tissues for the future recommendation. But it's revising, it's about revising 1 page and have it done. And there's 1 month to do this, but within that month, I suggested that he checks his manuscript, you know, makes it better. Okay.
Okay. So congratulations for LOUAI.
Thank you. You want to stand there for a photo?
Yes, with you.
Somebody has to take the photo.
Okay. Very much, bro. Really?
Hello?
Lila.
Miss you very much. How are you?
This
We're done.
You see?
Fine, did you?
Thank you. We're going to be there tomorrow at 1,
You
right?
remember me, Anahita?
Waiting for you in Bari.
Inshallah,
Take care
inshallah.
of the photo. Can you please?
Yeah. Take care, Analinda.
Take care, you too. See you.
And Merry Christmas, huh?
And Happy New Year to you and to
Happy
everyone.
New Year, yes.
Thank you.
This is for children.
Yeah.
We should take a screenshot.
Congratulations. Yes.
We should take screenshot with Professor Analinda and Professor Rada.
Okay, ready for a screenshot?
Can I take off the mask?
خلاص. Yes, done.
Done.
Done?
What about your mask? Even in the future, يعني ما the picture, sorry.
We have to wear a mask. I'm not taking my mask off. No way.
No way. Okay. Congratulations, LOUAI.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Okay, screenshot
your
is there.
patience.
So thank you very much. We will be in touch for the future developments.
Okay, keep in touch. Okay, bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.